Hey folks, this is one of our last lessons. We are kind of ending off our final major unit right now, and then next week we'll take a bit of a look at the medieval world, and also I'll be giving you information about the final 30% and what that's going to look like. So heads up for that. We'll go over it together in a video, and I'll give you lots of opportunity to sign up for things and ask me questions and all of that business, because it is a pilot project, as I said before, so the final 30% will look different probably than it does in your classes, and certainly probably different than you've had in history class before. So today is our final major lesson on Rome and the Roman Empire, and we're looking at how the Roman Empire falls, and also how Christianity rises and how that might play a role in the fall of the empire. So we're going to talk about those kinds of things together, and you're going to do a couple little activities, and then you will, of course, have a test after this. So one of the first really key things in terms of the fall of the empire, and when you talk about the fall of the Roman Empire, you're looking at 476-ish BCE, I think. You kind of have two different arguments. The argument of the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which is, as I said, 476 BCE, but then you also have the argument of the fall of the Roman Empire as a whole, which is when the kind of Byzantine Empire collapses, which is sort of in like the 1300s. Later on, one of the next activities you're going to do is watch a John Green video, and he makes the argument a little bit more for the latter there, for that idea that the Roman Empire doesn't actually fall until the 1300s when the Byzantine Empire falls. But let's talk about what that all means. So one of the first really important things that happens, and something that probably contributes to the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which is really what we are at least going to call it in this lesson, is when Emperor Diocletian decides to divide the empire. And you can see here in the map, he just kind of figures that the empire is too big. It's super chaotic at the time. Within, 22 emperors that came before him, 20 of them are assassinated. Like, there's just mass chaos and anarchy within the empire at this point. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Growing gap between the rich and the poor, people unhappy and hungry, poverty rising, bad leadership. So you've got a lot of different things going on, but regardless, there's chaos and anarchy within the empire. So Diocletian decides in 285 CE to split it into two joint empires. So it's not two different empires, it's still one empire, but it's ruled under two co-emperors. So just like how in ancient Sparta you had two kings, you've got two co-emperors here. So they're supposed to ideally work together. Obviously, you can imagine what the problems here would be. If you had one emperor that was stronger than another, one that was more ambitious than another, obviously that's going to lead to problems. The other weird thing that he does is he creates this tetrarchy, which is essentially that each half of the empire is not only going to have its own emperor, but each emperor is also going to have a junior emperor, which is a weird thing in and of itself. So now you've actually got four people in charge in different ways of this entire expanse. And you can see here how large the empire was at the time. Obviously difficult to keep together, but this, of course, becomes very problematic. It leads directly to the rise of the Eastern Roman Empire with the Emperor Constantine. I've put a link to this video in your handout if you're following along with the handout, so you can go back and watch the video, or you can pause this and watch the video now and take some notes on Constantine. But what you've essentially got is you've got civil war between the Western and the Eastern side, and Constantine, through various different ways, and this is a 4-minute video, so I do suggest you go back and watch it, he kind of comes out on top. And Constantine actually ends up being the first Christian Roman emperor. He declares himself a Christian. Part of it is he thinks he has this vision from God and this sort of spiritual awakening. Some people argue that part of it also is because he wanted to to be saved from some of the sins that he himself was a part of, things like poisoning his wife. So he wanted to kind of be saved and go to this idea of a heaven. He liked that idea, and so he becomes a Christian emperor. And we'll talk about how that really does factor into the fall of the Roman Empire, or at least the Western Roman Empire. But before we talk about that, let's take a little bit of a backtrack and look at how Christianity rises at this time, because it becomes very essential. Because even when you've got Diocletian dividing the empire, at that point you already have Christianity taking a hold over a lot of people within Rome. The origins of Christianity based in Judaism. So you've got this kind of idea of a Near Eastern monotheism happening. And again, this is Eastern Roman Empire stuff. And people in the Western side of the Roman Empire still very polytheistic. They believe in multiple gods, just as, everyone before us, in terms of the civilizations we've looked at, have. But in the Eastern side, you've got the rise of religions that are monotheistic, like Judaism. In 30 CE, you have in Palestine this idea of Jesus making his way to Jerusalem, teaching these new ideas as the Son of God, and followers really did believe that he was the Son of God, and most importantly, could forgive their sins if they believed in him and if they repented for what they did. So the important thing here is that this idea of Jesus as a savior develops into this new sect, this new kind of religion. And eventually you've got former pagan worshippers who are switching sides. They're moving from being these polytheistic, believing in Juno and all of these Roman gods, moving over towards Christianity. And one of the key things was the attraction in the belief of equality and salvation. That whether you were patrician or plebeian, whether you're a slave, woman, whatever, you could achieve salvation. And that idea was, especially to the Romans, who are at a time of increased immorality. You've got a lot of weird sex scandals, and of course, you've got the blood sports and all of those spectacles going on. A lot of people are looking for salvation, and this idea that they can be equal in salvation in Christianity was very attractive to them, certainly. And so once they see that this is a thing that they can have, a lot of them do start moving over to the side of Christianity, even in the Roman Empire. And that does happen over a period of a couple hundred years, of course. The reaction in Rome before Constantine and before obviously Christianity takes hold of the world is Roman authorities were like looking at this as a cult in the same way that they looked at Greek mystery religions as a cult, and they think it is a little bit dangerous. They're not entirely sure what's going on, but they see this idea of one God as being very threatening. Certainly it threatens the idea of religious toleration, because you can't tolerate the idea of multiple gods if you believe in only one God. And the idea of religious toleration had made the empire very peaceful, at least in terms of all of those kind of ideals and ideologies. And so this idea that monotheism was taking hold and creating this conflict, certainly the emperors did not like that. The other big part of it is that if you're worshiping only one god, you can't then as well worship an emperor. And this was the issue that we came up against with Akhenaten, that you were not only worshiping the Aten, but you were worshiping Akhenaten, his wife, his entire family. Whereas with Christianity, of course, that's not the case. You don't worship kings as gods. So the emperors see this as a conflict to them, and certainly as a danger and a threat to their power. They think it's going to make people disloyal to them, because if people don't see them as gods, then they might choose to go against them. They're very suspicious of this new religion as well. There's a lot of rumors about secret Christian rituals, child sacrifice, incest, cannibalism, all of those crazy kinds of rumors that get started around religions that people don't understand. The same kind of thing, again, with Greek mystery cults that we saw before. The other thing is that it goes against the Edict of Trajan, and Trajan, very good emperor, was someone who forbid the meeting of secret societies because he saw it as civil disobedience. And the meeting of Christians together goes against that. So it's also partially illegal at this time to have these kind of secret Christian meetings. And that just enhances this idea of and speculation about what Christians do when they're alone and sort of the scandal behind that, at least in terms of the Western Roman view. Persecution is recorded as early as Nero. He way back in 64 CE, blames the Christians for the Great Fire of Rome, that obviously many people suspected that Nero actually caused, and, then famously fiddles while Rome burns, and then creates his big, huge palace in the place where the burned Rome had fallen. So he decides to shift blames to the Christians so that he can take the blame off of himself. He holds a great public persecution, tortures Christians, and this is really the first documented persecution of them. You also saw Christians used in gladiatorial fights, so not as trained gladiators, but if you were in prison for being Christian, you could be tossed in with animals, you could be tied to the stakes in the center of, say, the Colosseum for animals to devour, but it was part of those blood spectacles and those blood sports. So from 64 CE with Nero all the way up to Diocletian in 303 CE, you've got a lot of different persecutions, and you've got the rise of Christianity slowly making its way into the western side of the Roman Empire. Diocletian himself was very concerned with the high positions that a lot of Christians were starting to hold in Roman society. And again, you're looking almost 300 years after Nero with that first persecution. And so he sees this as very problematic that Christians are holding these very strong, prominent roles. And so he visits the Oracle of Apollo and says that he's advised to essentially stop the rise of the Christians. And so in 303 CE, he commits a huge purge against Christians. Again, you've got lots of executions, persecutions, destroying of churches, all of that kind of stuff going on. So you have this definite attack against Christianity leading up to the time where you have the first Christian emperor under Constantine. But of course, as we know, Christianity does end up taking over. The Romans simply are not able to maintain the hold of society with polytheism. Under Constantine in 312 CE, and that's where after the Civil War he kind of takes hold of Rome and the empire and moves the capital from Rome to Byzantium and then renames it Constantinople, transfers all the power from the Western Roman Empire to the Eastern Roman Empire. This definitely is a big factor in the fall of Rome itself, but the fact that he himself adopts Christianity says a lot about the fact that the Roman Empire is now shifting. The Roman Empire will no longer be called the Roman Empire, it's called the Byzantine Empire, and that right there in and of itself is very different, but certainly Constantine as well has a lot of very different ideas about what this empire should be. He starts erecting churches, putting money towards that. He enforces laws for sexual morality, which in Rome was craziness. The Romans were very free about their sexuality. And we saw that certainly with the gladiators and their attitude towards the gladiatorial games. But it's really in all aspects of Roman life. You can look up crazy things like penis wind chimes and penis statues and penis lamps. Like, phallic symbolism was all over ancient Rome. So this idea that suddenly you've got these Christian ethical values being placed on the Romans by Emperor Constantine makes Rome no longer Rome. You no longer have an empire, even though it still includes Rome. It's not Roman anymore in terms of culture. Constantine also gives money to Christian churches. He forbids cults. He destroys the temples of all of those polytheistic gods. So you've got a total conversion of the empire. And a lot of those temples that were destroyed, he then uses that marble to create big, grand churches to God. And so you've got this complete shift in terms of the empire. And a lot of people, me included, tend to see this as the decline, the fall of the Roman Empire, because Rome is Rome no more. Still, it exists as a whole entity, but it is culturally, it is very vastly different, and it continues to go down that path of very different. So I want you to do a couple things. First thing I want you to do, go back and watch that Constantine video, the little 4-minute one. Then watch John Green's crash course and get a kind of a different perspective on the fall of Rome and take some notes on the questions that you've got there. Then I want you to take a look at the list of reasons that I've given you for the fall of Rome and kind of choose your own top 5. What do you think were the most important factors in the fall of the empire?